we have to make sure when we're having these practices of chiseling away, so that way we can reveal our true selves. We also make sure that we want to identify what we're actually chipping. And then not only that, but not chiseling so much that you end up chiseling the gold pieces as well. So the parts of yourself that's actually true, you feel like it's not necessarily attractive to, society.
You're listening to The Parallel Paths, a podcast designed to elevate your mind, body, and spirit so that you can get everything you want out of life. The only question is, are you ready?
All right, Solar Plexus time. Yes.
Welcome back to the Parallel Paths podcast. This week we are talking about the Solar Plexus.
So on our rainbow journey, we've been traveling through the chakras, and so today we're on the Solar Plexus. We're coming from from an elemental standpoint. We're coming from the earth element of the root chakra, which was our stability, our structure, our security. And then we moved into the water element of the sacral chakra, which we're dealing with fluidity, our emotions, our feelings, our seat of pleasure. And now we're transitioning into the fire element of the solar plexus. So we're literally leaving the more feminine qualities, which earth and water are more receptive and more passive. And now we're getting into more of yang or masculine energy, which is much more expressive. I like to say going into fire, there's almost like a alchemical quality to the solar plexus chakra. It has a lot to do with our ego, our sense of self, our identity, and who we are. So we're literally breaking away from the conditioning from our tribes, our families, our communities, and we're actually getting the power and the energy to step out and become our expressive selves, trying to individuate, as Carl Jung would say, or we're just trying to figure out who we are by figuring out what we are not. And there we have it. So the fire element, from a traditional astrology sense, when we look at the elements, we like to say that the fire element is comprised of the qualities of hot and dry. So hot is automatically energetic, it's active, it's expressive, and it's expansive. And then dry, there's a rigidness to dry. And as heat increases, you get dry. If you ever put something in the microwave too long, like something soft and that was initially moist, and it becomes dry because the heat increases, there you have the fire element. That's what's going to help you to be able to understand the difference between moving from the sacral chakra to the solar plexus is understanding heat. And so then when you take the fuel from the sacral chakra, which is water and moisture, and you add the heat and of the fire element of the solar plexus, that's where you have growth. So when you consider like a plant, for example, a plant needs water, moisture, so sacral chakra, plus it needs sunlight, which is solar plexus, in order to promote and sustain growth. So there we have it, the solar plexus.
Thank you. And that makes me think about how you said it goes from more of a heat to a dry. And when I was doing some research on the solar plexus, they were speaking about how this sense of identity, a lot of it gets shaped like in our teen years based off of the feedback that we're getting from our environment. And if that feedback is let's say I'm expressing myself and I get negative feedback. So now I'm going to shut off that part of myself because I'm only going to want to express the aspects of myself that are accepted by society. And they were saying that ultimately leads to that desire for perfectionism and that rigidity. So that makes sense how you said it goes from the heat to the dryness, which is that more rigid.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think the punishment, like we talk about our adolescence and our upbringing, that punishment that we seem to get from just being authentic and doing things our way, we get shut down by our parents, our teachers, society trying to teach us how we should be. And we do, in a sense, we lose the sense of self, because the inherent quality of fire is to be, it rebels, you know what I mean? It rises up, it's defying gravity. Whereas with our root and sacral chakras, those are dense, they pull downward. Fire is going upward. And so to be pulled down by society and told constantly that how you're operating, how you express yourself is not okay, is literally antithetical to how that particular chakra even works. And so we definitely end up growing up not really understanding who we are or what we are. And it becomes hard to identify the self from the version that society gave us. And it actually reminds me, I don't know if y'all heard of the story of the Golden Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you can look it up on YouTube. But basically the gist of it is that you have this monastery in this village, and they have a golden Buddha that's there, and they love it. They go there, they pray there, they're enjoying it, and they get news that there's going to be an invasion from a neighboring community that's gonna come and like overthrow them. So in preparation, they cover up their Buddha, and they put mud and twigs and stone and all kinds of stuff to cover it up. And so it does happen. This neighboring army comes and they take over. They do see the stone Buddha, but it doesn't have any value. It's just stone and twigs. But over time of this neighboring community having taken over time, the people that are native there forget about the golden Buddha. Until one day, this monk goes over to the stone Buddha. He kneels down, he's praying, because they still utilize the monastery. But when he gets up from kneeling to pray, a piece of the concrete from the stone Buddha breaks off and reveals something shimmery, something gold. And so he goes to get the other monks, and he's like, yo, like there's a golden Buddha like under here. So they come and they're all chiseling away at trying to get the stone off. And it's revealed that the golden Buddha is there. And so the moral of the story is basically that we're born inherently as the golden Buddha. We're born knowing who we are. We know that we're one with everything. Our authenticity is there. But then through schooling, society, all telling you what you're not, basically we've put this casing on top of our golden Buddha. And then over time, with so much of that, we've lost touch with the golden Buddha, because now we identify with the stone Buddha that is covered up. And then boom, something snaps. There's some sort of awakening, that little piece that breaks off. There's an awakening, and we're like, whoa, like what's that in there? And that could be a financial trouble, a divorce, a health crisis, a pandemic, anything like that can really trigger for that little piece to fall off and give you a glimpse of the golden Buddha that's inside of us. And then we basically spend the rest of our lives chipping away, trying to get that casing off to get back to our authentic self.
Love that story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That reminds me, one of my girlfriends out here, she was saying that after she gave birth, she felt such a stronger connection with her womb space. And then she started having deep visions. And like, so a part of her golden Buddha came through, but then she was ashamed of that, which we know shame is like the shadow of the solar plexus. She was ashamed of that because of what we've been taught about, having visions and psychic abilities and how that's like witchcraft and stuff like that. So yeah, so sometimes when you are revealed a part of your golden Buddha, you still have that subconscious programming that's telling you that you should be ashamed of it. And that shame is the pillar of the imbalancer of the solar plexus.
I know Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of piggybacking off what y'all said, but this is definitely one where you have to just be gentle with yourself, have grace and mercy, and then just first and foremost be forgiving of yourself. This is one that's definitely about your own particular will and, like they said, your self identity. So when revealing certain things and chiseling away that mud, it's gonna be certain things that trigger you. But again, this is where the grace comes in. So um it's one of those things where it's like Rome wasn't built in a day. Like you're not gonna heal instantly, but it's something that as long as you stay disciplined and you keep working towards, it can be healed. And just like the sun, this is the element of fire. This correlates with the sun, which is why I picked that as my background. But just like the sun sets every day, it rises every day. So each day is a fresh day. So I think just identifying with that, it's also identifying as above, so below. So that sun is within you. So just knowing that you also do have that light within.
I think a part of well, what I've learned, like as far as like some of the blockages with the chakra, the way I've understood it is like basically the lower three chakras, the liberation that we experience is literally ascending, whereas the higher consciousness from the upper chakras descend. And so basically it's like what happens is when the energy of liberation can't get past the solar plexus, then what you end up having is more upper chakra energy than you do lower chakra, because you've got those top four over the lower three. And so when we talk about shame, you have thoughts over instinct, because the instinctual energy of the solar plexus is not able to get through. And so then your thoughts is really what takes over, because that's where shame really operates, is in what we think about ourselves. And so like to really overcome some of the shame of not recognizing that inner sun within us, is we have to figure out ways to acknowledge what caused us to put on our casing, that stone casing in the first place, and then work on trying to clear that blockage so that the energy can radiate outwards. Because remember, the nature is to be expressive. That fire, sun energy is to be expressive. It has to release. It needs some sort of outlet in some sort of way. And so doing shadow work to help deal with our shame is definitely going to be important. And I think we should start there by looking at our childhoods and who our authority figures are, because I think authority has a lot to do with the sun too. You know, it dominates, it's masculine. So it's like, who are the authority figures in our lives? And did they promote us to be our authentic selves, or did they promote us to conform?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's saying a mouthful. And I don't want to get into too much of a personal story, but like I directly correlate so much with the solar plexus from the day that I was actually born to different events that have taken place in my life where, again, solar plexus related. So I've definitely had a lot of working experience in this particular chakra, and not being able to be your full authentic self definitely takes a toll on this particular energy center. And I guess my showing of the golden Buddha was when I first got sick, like at 23. And from there, that's when it was like, okay, I really don't care how anybody else feels. This is what I need to do to start aligning with true self. And from then, it's been a journey, but like I said, it's one that's well worth it, but you do have to have patience, perseverance, will, all that. But that's something that develops too. You said what?
I said encourage too. To be able to step outside that mold, to be your authentic self, despite, you know, what society might be saying.
The strong root chakra is going to be important for that, because the solar plexus is associated. I think will is a good key word, to describe the solar plexus, and even consider like how we use it in our day-to-day language. I will go to the store. I will call you. I will let you know. I will do this. I will finish that book. I will start that class. Like, we need that inertia to even get anything moving. So we have our root chakra, which we can say is like our vehicle or our vessel. Then our sacral chakra is what fuels that vessel. And then the solar plexus is the engine. And without the engine, you're not moving nowhere. You know, and so I think understanding too our desires, because we talked about, we look at it like a plant needing sunlight and water. We talked about the sacral chakra being associated with our desires. So if we know what our desires are, if we can get a hold of what our desires are, then that will be the fuel to ignite the will in us to go after being authentic and putting the action and movement behind the things that we really want to do. But without that fire, then the water element is really seeping through, where we're only dreaming. We're only you know, it's our biggest and our wildest dreams, but we can never get it to manifest. And I think manifesting is a good keyword for solar plexus too. And if our solar plexus is out of balance or not active, we're probably not really manifesting the things that we want. We're being more reactive to life instead of being proactive and in charge of what we want.
Yeah, you're definitely just a passenger in your own movie, I would say, if it's out of balance. So like, let's say, for instance, you're working a job that you hate. There's no reason for you to work that job. Like, there's plenty of other jobs or plenty of other things that you could be doing. Like, you don't have to put yourself through certain torture per se. Everything really is a choice at the end of the day. So I think when we take hold of those choices and we're able to, I guess, direct our lives in a more way that's suitable for our own joy and peacefulness, and that's when you'll start to really see some differences when it comes to this particular chakra.
One thing about just your identity in general, I feel like that's like the highest investment that you have at an early age, because usually when you are growing up in your let's just say like middle school or high school, this is like your first exposure to like big crowds or people that's like your peers, and you're just trying to connect. And one thing about it is, for connection, we have to identify, we have to attach to something, even like the music that we grew up to and the television shows that we watch. You know, we will find some type of familiarity with that show or with that song, so that way we can then identify to that. So if I identify to this artist, it doesn't matter what the artist does on his spare time or what he's doing in his personal life. If I can find a way to identify with this specific person, now I feel like I'm a little bit more confident in myself because I talk like him, or I play basketball like him, or whatever it is. So that's one thing that we have to kind of like get out of the practice of, is just trying to latch on to a outside identity that's not even serving us, and it's not even part of our own being. Because ultimately everyone is just a reflection of yourself anyway. So there's no point of trying to attain something you already have. So I think just within the solar plexus, we've pretty much been, whether it's through our words or whether through music or whether, you know, just little things that we hear or we see, whatever information that we're gathering, like it's been slowly building up for us to kind of, I guess with the golden Buddha analogy, it's like we've been subconsciously throwing mud on the gold Buddha, and until it hardens, because we're not even noticing what's going on, you know, within, it's covering our whole identity.
Yeah. And again, it's a protection mechanism, you know, because sometimes the world that we live in can't receive the light that we are. So we shrink it, you know, and we cover it up. I think especially for, you know, people of color, like so much effort has been put into us forgetting who we are and not realizing who we are and feeling ashamed about who we are. And humans in general, but specifically people of color. as far as like our ability to be like just being eternal and infinite beings, being able to manifest and create. Like just the other day, we were at dinner and I was like, okay, think of numbers. And we're like sitting there, you know, communicating telepathically. And it's like, that's a common thing that's easy to do, but it's just like, we're so detached from that being something that we can do. We don't even try to tap into that identity, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I was actually going to add on to that really quick. Just even right now, it just feels like an identity war or a crisis, because everything now is just overexposure of like, what do you want? Are you them, they, him, her, cis, whatever it is? I'm not even just speaking specifically on how you identify within your sexual orientation, but then just also within politics, because now it's like, even if you are pro or anti-Pope, that's like some type of political statement now. So it's like a lot of these things that we identify with has been kind of intrusive to what we really or truly are, and actually getting to the point where we can connect. So that way it's not so much about even just melanin dominant and melanin inferior. Like now, you know, we have like that contrast. So we don't identify, we can't connect. And that's one thing that's been hurting us, especially because we are holding on to so many traumas that probably have came from people who don't look like us. So now we just already want to associate anything that we don't identify with as evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
The this or that.
I was just gonna say what Jerica said earlier. It's like from those higher chakras coming down and the lower chakras coming up, everything just meets at the heart. So it's like the more that you can activate that heart energy and that heart chakra, that's really what starts to alleviate a lot of the issues that we as a society face.
100%. And that's, I mean, it's no coincidence that they're in order the way that they are, because it's like before you can begin to open up your heart chakra to love other people, you have to know who you are as an individual and love yourself too, because we're at our most uniqueness and individuality in the lower three chakras. And then once we cross over that heart chakra, there's more universal versus being individual. And so I think that it's like before you can come to know the oneness and the interconnectedness of us all, you can better understand that when you know who you are as an individual. But I do think that we have collectively, it's like an unhealthy, overactive solar plexus chakra, especially over here in the Americas, because we're obsessed with power and control in the most unhealthy way. And everything has to be this or that. Like you're so strong in who you are that you want everybody else to reflect it too. And it's like, no. They clearly have a blockage where they're not receiving the wisdom of the heart chakra, because the wisdom of the heart chakra will allow other people to be them all while you're being you at the same time. But we definitely have this or that, I feel like, energy going on right now. Like you have to be vegan or you're carnivore. Like you can't be in the middle anymore. There's something wrong with it, and we're demonizing what other people are doing. Like I happened to watch this video earlier that was talking about understanding how to really and truly be balanced in polarities. And so the example that was brought up was the term raising our vibration. That's something in the spiritual or conscious community that you hear often, that you need to raise your vibration. But so if we consider frequency, we know that frequency is simply how frequently something is being done. So the example given was to take the breath. So with the breath, if we're talking about a higher frequency, then we're breathing more frequently. So it might be something like, because it's more frequently that you're breathing in and out, versus the lower frequency of your breathing will be slower. And the point is that it doesn't have to be that resonating in the higher frequency or always being on a higher frequency is necessarily the better thing. Whereas it's more so you operate in whatever is necessary whenever the time is necessary. So to constantly, even as the conscious community or the spiritual community, to consistently be telling people, raise your vibration, you're being authoritative. We don't know what that person may be going through. Maybe they don't need to be in a sympathetic versus a parasympathetic state all the time. There is a necessity to slow down. And instead of looking at it as good or bad, we just look at it as polarities. And because we are balanced and well-rounded beings, we have the need to operate in both whenever we need to at our disposal. Mm-hmm. So there are times when we may need to be on a lower vibration. It may be necessary. And there are times that we need to be in a higher vibration, and there are times necessary for that. But it's like with the conditioning, if we always consider high vibration with good and low vibration with bad, then what are we really saying when we're telling people raise your vibration? You're automatically insinuating that a lower vibration is wrong in some sort of way. Mm-hmm. And so it's even taking a look at ourselves in the conscious community to see where we're using our conscious identity as a way to control other people and power over other people.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of an eye-opener for me too. And it makes me think about the ego, because somebody's pride, our ego automatically inflates and gets all whacked out of shape when we hear things that seem to be antithetical to what we know or what we learn. And it just had me questioning a lot of the motives behind society's constant push to make you choose this or that, right, versus just looking at consciousness as a tool, and you use it where you need it when you need it. So if at some point in your life it's most healthy for you to be vegan, be vegan. But then if there's another part in your life where animal protein is necessary, utilize that. And it's like I think that at different points in our lives, we have to be open to the alchemical transformation of change. And being able to look at things a little bit differently and not so set in our ways of this or that or good or bad.
So it sounds like we identify, so Solar Plexus is about your identity, right? But there's also, if you identify too much, then you're losing your sense of identity, because now you're putting yourself in a box. So is it that we identify that, okay, I am spirit, I am much more than this physical body, but we don't identify as, okay, but I am a psychologist, or I'm a mother, and I'm only, so that way we're not putting ourselves in those boxes. So we identify as the thing that is eternal, but outside of that, we don't attach ourselves to any type of identity.
Exactly, because we are one with the higher being, but we are very much having a human experience too. So it's like you don't want to be so much in your upper chakras that you're no earthly good at all. There's a place for both. And there's a tendency for people to gravitate towards the higher chakras because there's intuition involved. There's the seat of God. There's it's all this like this magical bliss of the heavens. And then, I'll get to them lower 3 chakras later. Like it's, as if by your Kundalini rising, it means that you're graduating to some extent, and you need to leave behind the lower 3 chakras that you graduated from. And not so much. There's a place for all of them to coexist in the same time span. We don't have to cut off the root chakra for the sake of the crown chakra, and vice versa. I just think we have to learn to understand that the polarities exist because you need to express both. I don't know if y'all ever saw that movie. I forget the name of it, but it's that Disney Pixar movie about the emotions. Inside Out, right. So one thing that movie taught was the necessity for sadness. Because remember, the joyful one wanted to take over everything. We need to be happy. We need this well-running oil machine. And we learned in the movie that there's a place for that. So to tell somebody, raise your vibration, you need to be happy, you need to be this, you need to be that, not so much. That's not being holistic. Being holistic is experiencing all of it. If you're constantly vibrating on your crown chakra all the time, what are you even doing here? What's the purpose of reincarnating to have the earthly experience? You're not holistic in that way. It sounds good to say you are, but you know, I would question, are you? What, and how does that feel like to hear that? How does that sound to your ego? Are you automatically pumping up with a defense already because we're questioning the identity? You know what I mean? It's like, have you gone from one identity of religion, or whatever, if it's Christianity, to only adopt another religion? You're just calling it something else. Whereas we can just simply be and let things appear when it resonates and when it's really just the time to do it.
And that's an interesting thing, because again, society doesn't really support that. Like they say, like, oh, if you're this today and that tomorrow, you're scatterbrained, or you're, you know, doing too much, or, you know, because they want you to just be in this little, you know, predictable box, right, that you can be in. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I was gonna say a lot of it too, it's like the Wu Wei. It's like stuff just is. Like you're not really having a judgment on anything. And I forgot who the philosopher was or what great mind said it, but it's like whenever they would rise each day, they would start every day with, today I shall judge nothing. And so like that was their way of, you know, kind of detaching and like having their own identity. So you're nothing is good or bad, nothing is, you know, whatever has that polar opposite, they're in the middle. They're stoic in a sense.
I actually follow the same type of regime myself, because I wake up and I already have like my mantra for the day, where I say, I'm the master of my mind. I am not my thoughts. I'm the master of my emotions. I am not my emotion, and you know, things like that. And just basically putting me in that mind frame that I already know that everything around me exists, and it also exists within me. So I don't necessarily have to hold on to so many identities about what I need to do or who I am. And if I don't make this phone call, then, you know, I don't know if I did that well today, you know, things like that. I just make sure that everything that I set out for the day is within a holistic sense, versus thinking about there is a condition to the love that I have for myself. Which I feel like is hard for me in general, because I already grew up in an environment that didn't really preach love, or didn't really preach affection in any case. So for me, my identity already felt like I wasn't wanted or needed, because I was that person who loved to see my friends and family succeed and wants to be the helping hand. But ultimately around this time, it was seen as, oh, you a goofy or whatever it is. Like you basically someone who we can't, like someone who they think is gullible. Like you're just gonna fall for anything and things like that, even though for myself, I'm just walking within the trust that I have for how I feel, you know? So if I feel like this is just behavior for myself, then that's what I do. But over time, when you go through, you know, certain relationships or certain friendships or certain family situations, you start to feel yourself hardening. So now you, if you ever want to revisit those type of emotions you've had, it just feels uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if I should be this affectionate, you know, with the people around me. Let me just, you know, whatever it is. And that becomes like this whole habit. So I feel like just within that, for people who do kind of resonate what I was talking about, when you've been trained to be rigid for so long, and then you're trying to revisit that softness that you had for yourself, it does take time, but ultimately there, like you said, there's a necessity for the sadness, because ultimately what sadness does is it reveals, and everything that we're trying to do is reveal everything to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, just like what you said too, it's emotions, it's energy in motion. So you're gonna experience anger, sadness, joy, happiness, whatever. But it's just allowing those emotions to process and continue to go. And one of my favorites of all time is Bruce Lee, but I always say, like, be water. And so again, it goes back to what we were saying, but like literally taking the shape of whatever vessel or container that you're in, being able to adjust. Like sometimes it might be rocky, sometimes it's completely smooth, but at the end of the day, it goes back to your thought process and how you're managing things too. So setting the proper intentions, trying to clear your mind, and again, bringing it back to the middle, bringing it back to the heart chakra, but just trying to stay balanced. And that's really the key at the end of it, is balance, finding balance in everything.
I had a question real quick, but Blair, in your experience, what do you feel like was that moment? Because I know you touched on it a little bit, but how did you know that this was your identity versus an identity that was placed on you? What revealed to yourself that made you like, oh, this is me?
So I had to figure out what was going to work with my body, what my body responded to be able to heal itself. And for me not to be able to take prescriptions and be going to a doctor and all of this stuff, I started with Dr. Sebi's teachings and Dr. Laila Africa. So just taking that alkaline, let's say, based diet, I was definitely able to transform how my own body was functioning, how it responded. I feel like how I was aging changed. So diet is not necessarily an identity thing, but it's me overstanding really what's in our foods now is not the same as 75 years ago when our grandparents were going to the field and killing their cow. It's not the same. So understanding what you're putting in your vessel also has a big role in how you're thinking. So if you're not eating right, you're not thinking right, in my mind, at least in my experience. I've had some crazy stomach spasms to where Jared can attest. I've actually been at work and like pretty much on the floor, like under my desk, in an episode where my stomach is hurting so bad, like it'll make me want to throw up. Probably would throw up, but I can't think. Like it was in so much pain, and like all of this coming from my solar plexus area, to where I can't have clear thoughts. So me eating different and really just changing the way I looked at my body in general and how I took care of myself started to make me find more balance in everything. And I mean, it's still a daily work in progress. Like you're not gonna lose all of this programming from a kid overnight. Like I said, it's something that you have to have grace and patience with. So I'm still constantly working on self. Every day is a day to improve. So even if it's 1% from the day before, I'm still working towards being a better person every day. So with this one in particular, it definitely does affect your intestinal area, your stomach, your digestive tract, and me being a Virgo as well, that's actually the sign that rules over that particular area. So like I said, I have a lot of connections with this particular chakra, but poor digestion and stomach and anything nutritional based, this is why I chose the niche that I did and how 3 Layers actually got started from that in particular.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of that, those adversities really giving you that clarity. So it's like, don't shy away from adversity. Don't take adversity as something personal, like just be observant during that process and like, see it as opportunity to learn and to make you clear, because ultimately when you're feeling that, that tension, that contrast, it's because you are separating from self. So when that's happening, you're noticing it, like really tune in, listen to your heart. I've started asking my heart, like, what's on my heart today? Or what would my heart say? And be real with yourself, because sometimes when you are asking yourself, like, what should I be doing? It's so personal that your ego doesn't want to identify with it. But when you can somewhat separate and say, what will my heart say to me today? It creates that level of separation to where, now that protective filter isn't up as much. So you can really hear that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what I was doing with my body. It's like, how would my body appreciate me eating this? And like, that's literally how I had to start figuring out like what to eliminate from my diet. So again, I'm not pushing my diet or anything else on anybody. So like, I know we had a discussion, this is off key, about like the dating thing. It's just a preference. It's not me trying to change anybody. That's why I was like, yeah, it would be nice to attract somebody who kind of has the same mindset as I do in certain things, but like, I'm not forcing anything on anybody or trying to change anybody. I understand there's balance and everybody has their own unique journey, and it's going to be certain challenges or certain things that come up that you have to overcome. And it's about you finding that secret sauce to find out what works best for you.
I was going to say, for you, Jerica, I actually was curious about, for you, I know you have just multiple labels or ways you can identify yourself, whether it's being a professional, an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, a mother, and all of these different identities. Like, how do you feel any there's any weight or responsibilities to uphold these identities, or they already feel just a part of yourself?
I think the one that comes naturally to me the most is probably me being a mother, mainly because it's being responsible for two souls that didn't ask to be here. So I do go out of my way to make sure that everything that I'm doing is keeping their future in mind, and what I'm molding and what I'm instilling in them. But I think that when, I know we talked a little bit about it with the sacral chakra, like comparison, like comparing our lives to others. And I've just finally gotten to a place to where I'm comfortable with doing what works for me. And getting rid of some of that shame is what helped to be able to live the way I wanted to authentically. Like, I had always wanted to be a really good mom. Like, even from a young age, like I knew nurturing was going to be my thing, mainly because my mom was a little bit emotionally distant. And she was a lot more rigid than what I'm used to. I'm a Pisces, and my mom is a Libra with the Aries moon. So I wasn't really used to, she came off very overbearing sometimes, and I would shrink, I used to really, I've always had a huge love for science. My mom hated science. So like her telling me her stories of how she didn't care for science as a kid began to rub off on me. And I used to think it just wasn't cool to like science anymore and stuff like that. And I just became a real big people pleaser. And I definitely was caking on that mud and covering up the golden Buddha, to be honest, as a sense of emotional survival. So it was the way for me to, like Dr. Makita said, to protect myself, because my feelings were getting hurt. Some of the comments or things that would be done was hurting my feelings, and not that she would have done it intentionally, of course, but of course, if we're not communicating with our kids to know what their desires and their dreams and their wishes are, and as parents just acting as a guide instead of trying to dictate and change it, then we're not encouraging them to be them. We're encouraging them to be versions of us and our little proteges. And I became that. I became my mom's protege. Everything she wanted me to do, I pretty much did. And I took all of her direction in everything. I made decisions that I probably wouldn't have if I didn't think she would respond in a certain way. She was that authority figure in my life. And I took everything she said to heart. But when I went through my divorce, and that's after I had already had my 2 children, that was like the break off of the mud in my little peak of the golden Buddha shining through. It started out with me, the way that I handled the infidelity of that marriage. A lot of people didn't think was normal. I ended up meeting with the woman. I didn't do the cursing out. I didn't do the fighting. I didn't blow out any tires or scratch and key any cars or nothing like that. I really went internal. And there was a weird part of me that felt like the woman that was the other woman at the time. There was a part of me that felt like she had gotten herself involved emotionally in something and was too deep to come out of it. I didn't feel like it was a personal attack towards me to be sleeping with my husband. I think it was very much a selfish, personal journey of her own. But it was so strong that knowing that you're breaking up a family and knowing that there were children involved was not enough for her to go her own way. She still wanted the experience that she was pursuing. And on a deep level, I understood that. And I didn't understand where that was coming from. It's like, I felt like I am supposed to be reacting and responding a certain way. And I wasn't. And then I started questioning that, like, whoa, like, if I don't trip on her or go off on her, is she going to try to overpower me in some kind of way or think that she can bully me or something? And it took me a minute to be okay with those thoughts. But eventually I was. And they're still together to this day. My children spend time with her. It's been 4 years now. And it was hard. But one of the 4 agreements, which is a book I always recommend by Don Miguel Ruiz, my 2 favorite ones are not to take things personal. And what's the other one? Hold on. I always keep the book close. Don't take things personal and don't make assumptions. Those are my 2 favorite. And me getting cheated on in my marriage and my husband leaving me for another woman, I had to realize it was a personal journey with them, that it didn't have anything to do with me. And I had to let him go and let them figure out what it was they were going to do together. And I just kind of bowed out gracefully from it. And for a while, I thought, am I being too docile? Am I being too passive? Are they running all over me? That was my awakening, but it allowed me to dig headfirst into motherhood, because now I was a single mom. Now it was like, what do I want? What experience do I want for my children? Because I darn sure didn't want a split household, but here we are. And so by me getting my attitude together and keeping it together, I decided I couldn't control whether or not he wanted to stay in the marriage, but I could control how the co-parenting would go. And I think by me being accepting of what the circumstances were, in return, we co-parent very well. We don't fight. There's no issues as far as that's concerned. And I think a big part of that is because I didn't come out slinging during our divorce settlement. I wasn't trying to be unfair. It was an amicable split. You know, I didn't like the way he went about it, but you can't force people to be with you. And there's growth that takes place. And sometimes you outgrow each other. And I was able to be more in charge of what I wanted for my kids' life. So sometimes it's like, be careful what you ask for, because you don't know how the universe might deliver it. And I may not have been able to be as in charge of my kid's life if I had a husband around versus us being divorced and I had the physical custody, so they're with me. and I can get that nurturing, I can really instill the things that I wanted to instill in them. And I have the opportunity to do that now. So ever since then, I've been able to work on myself and realize that it's okay for people that for a part of who they want to be when they grow up is to be a mom. I felt like for a long time that wasn't a good enough career, or that wasn't a good enough occupation. But it's so important. And I've gotten strength and confidence in that role, in understanding my kids and understanding myself so that I can be the best parent to them. And it's been a great journey ever since. And I have the polarities. I have a son and I have a daughter. So there's so many personal experiences that I get just with that alone, and trying to let them honor their masculine and feminine, but then allow my son to honor his feminine and allow my daughter to honor her masculine, and vice versa. And so it really allows me to get to know myself through other people. In my astrology chart, I have Jupiter in the 7th house. The 7th house is the house of other people. Jupiter is a part of our growth and expansion. So one way that I grow and expand is through my relationships to other people. I learn more about me with how I interact with you. Mm-hmm. And so going through a divorce, it challenged myself, my character. It challenged how, okay, Jerica, how are you going to respond to this? And dealing with the other woman who is now, like almost like a stepmom, basically at this point. How do you react with that? What do you do with that? And I'm loving it. It's been some challenges, but that builds character and allows me to choose how I want to respond. I could have just been reactive and just went off and cursed him out and did all of that. I chose, it gave me the opportunity to be in charge of where I wanted to direct my energy. And I directed it straight into that heart chakra, went straight into heart chakra work. And I think that's what allowed me to be as compassionate as I was, is, my lower chakras were at a very fragile place at that time, but going into my heart space provided strength for all 3 of those chakras. That consciousness that came down and hit my heart chakra and the work I was doing built my confidence back up of my solar plexus chakra. It allowed me to feel my feelings and deal with them in my sacral chakra. And then I had to rebuild what emotional security and security in general looked like for my root chakra, because all of that was snatched away when I went through my divorce. So it's crazy the way that the chakras really feed off of each other, and the holisticness of being balanced, slowing down when you need to, and then ramping up in other areas where you need to. So that's the long answer.
That's good. Definitely did. Man, just like that whole journey in general, it's just amazing. And it's crazy because I know so many people who have similar journeys, or at least somewhat identical in certain aspects. I know we all can attest to certain things that has been our awakening point, or just chipping away from the Buddha statue. So just within that, I was just revisiting times within my timeline and just feeling like, man, I know those times because myself, I'm a father, and then I have to try to reevaluate what does a father mean to myself, because my father passed before I was even able to compute I might be a father one day. Maybe I should converse with him about it, So before I even was in that awareness, he was already gone from this realm. So for myself, I had to kind of know bits and pieces from people or family that was around, that was an actual active parent at the time. And so when my son did come, I had somewhat of a sense of what I needed to do, but then I saw myself being more of a rigid version of what I see as caricatures on television. So people who, you have to be this authoritarian, or you have to be this breakneck beat down type, or not no child aggression or anything, but basically you have to be stern, especially when you're dealing with, a young man, a young king. So for myself, and I know Makita can attest to it, that when I do have my son, I do battle between someone being nurturing and then someone who's being more directive. And so with my son, he's very sporadic, he doesn't necessarily focuses so much. And so I remember me just like always telling him like, hey, focus, what are you supposed to be doing right now? Type of thing. And I remember Makita also said like, well, have you ever taught him what focus is? And just, and I've also heard it on a lecture. I forgot what's the name was, but he said like a lot of us don't necessarily know how to articulate focus or how to teach focus. We just are really still copying what we saw, what focus is supposed to represent. So my level of focus is not even her level of focus. Her level of focus is probably not your level of focus. You know what I mean? So it's just within that aspect, because my focus comes primarily from the root chakra, but there's other people who focus more on a mental level or a spiritual level, or they like to be more expressive emotionally, or with their clothes, or how they whatever vocalize. So I had to allow that space for my son to say, okay, I know that he is able to focus on the things that he deems, like it's worthy. Like, okay, I see what's going on here, so I can piece this together. So the challenge was for myself. The challenge was for me to not rely so heavily on my root chakra to kind of get my point across. I had to meet him at his level, which was pretty much more in his, like where you're more expressive or more intuitive. So that was a challenge for me, because I love the root chakra. I'll wake up, do Tai Chi, work out, and then do like 3 or 4 errands. And I've only been up 2 hours, So it's just little things. It's just like little things like that. But there is that truth with that as above, so below, because I believe that my son is that polarity for me. So on the parts that are, seems to be an irritant or whatever it is, it's really more so of a challenge to my spirit, because now he's teaching me how to focus, because I can't be so easily, irritable and things like that if I actually just maintain focus on what the importance of is building that connection with him. Yeah, I resonated with that a lot.
So the solar plexus is still something I am working on constantly. From an early age, I was implanted with the beliefs that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't attractive, I wasn't smart, from like very little. So what happened is I developed social anxiety, which is shame of who my identity is. So it makes sense, like when I think about the types of physical things I struggle with, hip issues, lower back issues, bloating, all of this stuff happening in that solar plexus sacral region. And I would say my golden Buddha moment was, it was more so realizing like I can't feel shrunken anymore, because I kept having people tell me like, you're meant for something great. And even I had visions of like, wanting to help the world in a major way, or even motherhood. Like I was the same way, Jericho, where as a young age, I was like, I can't wait till I'm in my 30s and I'm a mom. Like that's what I would dream about. So I always had this sense that I was meant for something greater, that I was this expressive, big being. I'm a Leo. So people were like, are you really a Leo? You don't really act like a Leo. But for so long, I lived in that shadow of shame about myself. So once I went to grad school to get my degree in psychology, it kind of forced me to face what I was experiencing. So I started noticing, okay, you actually have anxiety. You have social anxiety. And the only way for you to get over that is to face it head on. So I started modeling. I feel like that was like one of my big like golden Buddha moments, because if somebody were to put a camera in my face, like I would just shrink. I would just get so tight, so tense. So I was like, well, I'm gonna have to keep doing this over and over again, because I can't stand to live life this way, especially when I know that my calling is bigger than myself. I know that if I don't become who I'm supposed to be, it's not just me letting myself down, it's me letting the world down. So tapping into modeling, that was really, and then when I started to notice that voice in my head was getting quieter and quieter, that voice of judgment was getting quieter and quieter. And I was like, actually, this is fun to like perform and be in front of people, to speak. Like I used to, oh my God, be so afraid of speaking in front of people. Now I love to speak. I love to teach. So I would definitely say the modeling thing. And even today, like I still struggle with that voice coming up. I still feel like I'm living as a very small version of who I am. And one of the benefits of getting in a relationship, again, when people reflect who you are. I was in a space before Marquise and I met. I was in a space where I was very confident, self-love was through the roof. I was really comfortable being who I was, until now I'm around another person 24 hours a day. And then that's where that little judgment monster comes up with like, okay, well, but are you okay with being you in front of another person? Mm-hmm. So now I'm in the next stage of it, to where it's like, okay, can you still live without any shame, or still not shrink yourself with this other person around? So that's where I'm at currently, is still working with that. And fortunately, I have a partner who encourages my expression, and then reminds me, like being in an environment that tells you it's okay for you to be who you are. That's so important. And if you're not getting it from your environment, then you have to be willing to create that environment on your own, even if that means being alone, being by yourself. You got to create that.
Oh my gosh, I resonate with that so much. Like feeling like there's something bigger for you to do. And like for me, I'll struggle with that imposter syndrome. Like, at what point do you know enough before you feel like you're capable of being it or doing it? And then being afraid of like, oh, but you didn't used to be like that, or you didn't used to think like that. And it's like, well, that's the whole purpose of changing and growing. And like I said at the beginning of the show, like there's something so alchemical about the solar plexus. Like we're literally transforming and transitioning into something else, and we have the right to do that however many times we want to. And I used to feel shame around that, like, oh, this is who I've established myself to be. I put out content that solidifies that. I've marketed myself this way, and so now I just have to be married to it. This is it. And it's like, no, like we have the right to reinvent ourselves and keep chiseling off the stone Buddhas and figure out what parts of us we really want to be. And we're not required to be the same person that we are yesterday. And that's one thing that relationships can challenge you on, because we oftentimes want our partners to remain consistent in who they were when we met them. And because it helps our security. Like, I need you to continue playing this role in my life because it benefits me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, we have to allow that room for change and reinvention. And I'm with you, Makita. I'm still on the road to figuring that out. And I don't think I ever will actually figure it out. I think I will. It's constantly, life is supposed to be a journey. It's a dance, and you're supposed to not worry about the destination so much as in the journey itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Living more in the moment, taking things present as they come.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In Reiki, we have 5 precepts. And the first precept is Kyo Dake wa, which means just for today. And I love that part of the precept because it just reminds you, like Blair mentioned earlier with his background, how the sun rises every day. So when we say just for today, whatever happens today only has to stay in today. You can reinvent yourself and be reborn as a new sun tomorrow. And then if that day didn't go the way you want it, be reborn again as a new sun the next day. And it just keeps going.
Yeah. And even just in the moment, that's why like I'm so big on teaching deep breathing. Because it's like when you take that new breath in, that is new life. The moment is new, it's refreshed. So it's like it's awesome if you need to repeat that process, just do it. Oh, like you literally could just put the reset button right now. Take that breath.
Yep. What are some, I guess, some symptoms that can kind of tell us where we may be holding solar plexus issues, or maybe even if it's under or overactive?
I actually do have some
go ahead, Blair.
symptoms that are physical: poor digestion, gas, nausea, diabetes, respiratory issues, arthritis, abdominal aches, nerve pain, and then weight fluctuation, whether it's problems in losing or gaining. And then just a lot of inflammation. We're talking about fire again, so different joints, different muscles, whatever, being inflamed.
Yeah. And we tend to, because our solar plexus is connected to our identity, that's where a lot of times we may accumulate weight. If your weight accumulation is tied to solar plexus or identity issues, you're probably going to see weight there because it's the body's way of trying to protect you. It's a protection mechanism, so to speak. And a lot of times people that are overweight, they want to be seen. They want to be seen as individuals. And when they feel like they're not seen, they're kind of covering up with emotional eating, basically.
Yeah. And that's why it's important when it comes to affirmations. I know affirmations are really good for the solar plexus. Like, what are you identifying with? So being mindful. Being mindful of what you are identifying with. Like, oh, I am, like even like I am an addict or whatever it is, like you're affirming, or I have depression, or I'm a depressed person. Like, be mindful of things, like even if you're experiencing symptoms of something, right? Don't identify with, because that's now the story of who you are that you're programming into your subconscious. So just be mindful.
It goes back to choice. It goes back to the choice that I was speaking of earlier, just choosing those thoughts. I am whatever you want it to be, identifying whatever the issue is and then flipping that.
And even if it's not true, because I know a lot of people, when I give them affirmations, are like, but I am still sick. But I'm like, but you're in the process of healing. So why not say I am healing? Like, it's okay for you to say that, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Abraham always talks about, don't focus on what's happening, focus on what you want. Don't say what you don't want. Just say what you want and focus on that.
Say who you want to be.
Or then taking it a step further, like feeling it, like actually having it. So even having a thought back to when you felt your healthiest, like let's say you're sick and you're like, no, I feel amazing. I feel healthier than ever. So it's claiming that energy in that moment. And the more you do that, the more you start to adapt toward that.
Yep.
Some food recommendations to balance our
pineapple, anything yellow.
Yellow food.
Squash.
Bananas. Mango.
I also wanted to bring up a few herbs that you can be consuming while you're in there. From herbs, you can, well, for one, frankincense is a very good.
Oh, I love to burn.
Yeah, burn.
I just burned one.
Yeah,
that's what I started with.
Having a lot of copal around you. Minerals, gold, tiger eye. I'm gonna go ahead and let Jerica speak more on that in a minute. But as far as everything else, cedar, especially if you want to be around plants and things like that, is good.
Don't forget chamomile.
Yeah, chamomile.
What do you call it? Sunflowers, marigold. If you have that around, oak is a very nice stirring solar plexus. emitter. So yeah.
And don't forget the sun. Get out in the sun.
Yeah.
That's the most
yes.
important nutrient. Get out in the sun.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And we're not talking about
exactly.
open up the window. We're talking about bare feet on the ground, rooted.
Yes. Connection with the sun. I recommend too, like, especially for people who like essential oils, mandarin and lemon, which are very invigorating. So
Forgot
if
about my
you're
favorite
lacking
lemon.
that energy, get you some mandarin. And of course, make sure that if you're going to use it on the skin, make sure that you use a carrier oil or something that you can mix it with. But yeah, mandarin and lemon are very invigorating, high energy
Ginger as
type
well.
of oils.
Okay.
Oh yeah, ginger. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as crystals, I am recommending the number one on the list for today is going to be astrophyllite. That's this one right here. This is a raw piece. Astrophyllite is really good with getting a person back in tune with their self, their divine purpose, remembering your will, and what you're here to do. So astrophyllite is really good for that.
Let me throw one in there. Citrine.
Oh yeah.
Citrine. Yeah, citrine is good too. 100%. I don't have a piece over here I can show you, but that's a good one. Ocean Jasper. Ocean Jasper is good for uplifting your mood. It's going to help you to feel joy and happiness again. And it helps with emotional healing. This is Mahogany Obsidian. Mahogany Obsidian is, I like to call it the bodyguard of crystals. So it really allows space for emotional healing, but it protects, it's like a psychic protection too. So it's like while you're reinventing yourself and you're trying to get to know yourself and develop what your identity is, it will help to protect the naysayers and people that are trying to tell you what you're not, and oh, that's not who you used to be, and all of that, so that you can heal privately and comfortably. And last, hyperstein again. Hyperstein for the shadow work is so important, you guys. Like the shadow work, because it helps you to recognize the parts of you that you have shamed. We talk about shame and we talked about rejection. So working with hyperstein is going to help you to integrate your shadow side and be able to heal that. And then 2 things I didn't do in the root and sacral chakra videos are affirmation cards. I just have 2. One is my own energy. I love being there for friends and family while staying true to myself. I don't let others' energy or mood affect my own. To help a friend in a hole, I don't need to jump in the hole with them. Simply reach out a hand and it's up to them to do the rest. So don't overextend your energy. And then creator of happiness. I reclaim my power to create my own joy and happiness. It is not dependent on any outside source or individual. Therefore, it can never be taken away. It can always be found within me.
That's fire.
And of course, if you didn't know, the associated color is yellow.
Yes. Awesome. That was good, y'all. Yes. Brought a lot of light. So Blair and I made a meditation e-course. We have some mudras in there for the different chakras and just help you enhance or start a new meditation practice, because we know meditation is key as far as balancing our chakras. So we'll put that link in the bio or in the description as well.
All good stuff.
So my last 2 cents would just be for people to try to be as holistic as possible. Don't always consider things as bad or good. Try to be well-rounded. If you find yourself stuck on one end of any spectrum, sit with it, meditate with it, and ask yourself why. Why are you so comfortable in this one space? And be willing to venture out. That's the fire energy of the solar plexus, is to venture out. You know, you have your home, but then you don't want to be at home all the time. Get in your car, drive out, do things, use that expressive nature, and sit with yourself and see how you feel. It's one day at a time. So just for today, work on the solar plexus.
All right, y'all. So that's all we have for this episode of the Parallel Paths podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And any recommendations or comments you have, put those in the comments below. All right, peace.
Peace.